Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is Bill Maddox from the Carsey School of Public Policy in Durham, New Hampshire. I'm actually broadcasting today from Wilmington, Delaware. I'm very happy to be able to bring Mal Warwick to the SMDP webinar series. I'll tell you more about Mal in a second. I just want to remind you that we are, as usual, going to have an hour-long webinar. This webinar will consist of a poll in the beginning, so pay attention to a poll that you can participate in. And as usual, we do have a question option. If you look on your GoToWebinar navigation bar, you will see a place where you can type in questions. I'll be monitoring those questions. And then we will be, at the end of Mal's presentation, we will have an opportunity to ask Mal several questions. So please go ahead and write those questions whenever you feel like you are ready to write them. Mal Warwick is a co-author with Paul Pollack of The Business Solution to Poverty, Designing Products and Services for 3 Billion New Customers. It's published last year by Barrett Kohler, and it's the winner of the Gold Axiom Business Book Award in 2014. Mal is an author, social entrepreneur, impact investor, and blogger. He manages www.businesssolutionforpoverty.com and reviews books on www.malwarwickbooks.com. He's one of 3 partners in One World Football Project, which is an amazing project that is trying to get footballs or soccer balls in the hands of millions of young people around the world. It's a social enterprise and a B corporation established in Berkeley, California. The company manufactured and distributed more than 1 million of its virtually indestructible soccer balls during its first 4 years, expanding opportunities to play for over 30 million disadvantaged children in 170 countries. So Mal is an expert social entrepreneur, and with Paul Pollack has written this really terrific book that we're really excited to be able to share with you today. I do want to also mention that Mal is going to be on the UNH campus on September 30th, which is a Tuesday. He'll be making a presentation in the Holloway Commons. The presentation will start at 5 o'clock. It's open to the public. It's a keynote for the UNH Social Business Innovation Challenge, which is an exciting event that we offer for UNH and other students to participate in to design and present a innovative new social business idea. So we'll be kicking off that challenge at the event on the 30th. Mal will be speaking, and you'll have an opportunity to meet Mal, buy his book, have him sign it, and learn more about this incredible new approach to solving some of the most difficult problems in the world. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mal and have him tell us about the business solution to poverty.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's really great to be here. However, I want to start by asking a question of all those who are participating in this webinar. We have a poll, which I'd like you to post now. Thank you very much. Now, you have the option to answer this very simple question. Please do so without delay, and we'll see the answers as they come up in just a moment. Please make your choice. 1 choice per person, 1 box per person. Okay, how are we doing? We voting? Has everybody voted? How long does it take for people to vote?
We have about 72% have voted right now, Mal.
Well, what's a good cutoff point?
I usually will get about 85%. People are.
Let's go for 90%.
Okay.
Okay.
75%.
Come on, 75% and counting. Do I hear 76? 76 going once. 76 going 77. How are we doing? Any more votes?
We may have some unattentive people that are not necessarily paying attention to their screen. So
wake up, folks. Wake up. It's time to vote. It's election day here in the Ethernet. Okay.
Well, it's going to be frozen at 76. So how about if we call that good and close the poll?
All right, so what are the results?
So we have 5 years from now, where is it likely you'll be working to make the world a better place? And we have 48% that say nonprofit organizations, 48% for-profit businesses, 13% government, and 10% of the people don't really exactly know right now.
Okay, so this is an interesting perspective, and I would like to know at the end, we tried setting up a poll to find out whether or not this is the case, but I'd like to know whether after this presentation of mine, some of you who are thinking about being involved in a nonprofit organization 5 years from now may have changed your mind, because we're going to be talking about the business solution to poverty. But okay, let's take this poll away, and let's now go to let's go to the presentation. So Bill, there we go. Show my screen. All right. Can you see the title screen on my screen? I hope you can, because right now we're going to launch away on the business solution to poverty. What we're
I see it now.
about,
We're all.
Sorry, Bill?
Just want to let you know I can see it fine, so you're okay.
Okay, that's great. Now, we begin with one incontrovertible fact. There are at least 2.7 billion people living today on $2 a day or less. Now, there are two things that are very important about this number, whether you like numbers or not. Number one, this constitutes nearly 2 out of every 5 people on the planet. And number two, this number of poor people is greater than the total population of the planet in 1950, when the whole effort to end poverty more or less officially began. Now, 60 years later, therefore, there are more poor people today than there were people when the whole program started. So that's why we can say, as I believe without any qualification, conventional development aid has failed to end poverty, despite all the frothy press releases from the World Bank and the UN and the large international NGOs. We also know, given the absence of any evidence to the contrary, that CSR, or corporate social responsibility, has had no impact at all on, no discernible impact at all on poverty. It's cosmetic from that perspective. If you have, like me, wandered around in the social impact investing space looking for money for very worthy, very potentially high impact social enterprises, you will know that social impact investors confuse mission and profit. They, by and large, just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to know what they're really looking for. We also know from many, many decades of practical experience that charity doesn't lift people out of poverty. It just simply doesn't work. So the question then remains, if all of these conventional efforts have failed, how can we help these 2.7 billion people lift themselves out of poverty? A couple of facts to begin with. Number one, poor people have to invest their own time and money in order to escape poverty. If they don't do that, if they're not bought in, if they're not invested in the process, then no manner of charity and no manner of education or guidance is going to make a bit of difference if they don't want to get where you think they ought to go. Second of all, when we're talking about poverty on a global scale, we're talking about rural poverty. 70% of those 2.7 billion people live in rural areas, often very, very isolated, and almost always on farms. Small farms are the key to ending poverty. because all of those 70% of the world's rural poor are going to earn their living directly or indirectly from farming. So it was with these understandings more than 30 years ago when my co-author Paul Polak founded an organization called International Development Enterprises. And the then revolutionary concept behind IDE was that instead of treating poor people as objects of pity or subjects of charity, they ought to be treated as customers. IDE set out to work with poor people to develop products and services that they themselves would help to conceive and design that would then help them lift themselves out of poverty by putting more money in their pockets. This was the fundamental premise of IDE, and it should be of all anti-poverty work. The simplest and most direct way, and for the most part, the only effective way to help people get out of poverty is to put more money in their pockets. So IDE in its early years fastened on an invention coming from a Lutheran engineer and a development program in South Asia called the treadle pump. This is, as you can see, a simple device, operates like a Stairmaster, where using leg power, the device builds up pressure to pull water out of the ground from as deep as 20 or 25 feet below. So IDE took on the job of commercializing the treadle pump in northern Bangladesh. That is, developing marketing and distribution systems that the charity that had developed the device was unable to do. And they managed to diversify the manufacturer using 75 local village-based shops like this to perform most of the work and get a piece of the action. They contracted with, excuse me, they contracted with a total of some 3,000 village dealers to sell the treadle pump to farmers who would come into the village or the town for one reason or another, and therefore constituted a larger sales force for the product over and above the IDE staff. The IDE cut in the well driller as well. The well driller was part of the package. He was a locally hired person who took his fee out of the total $25 total cost installed of a treadle pump. That, by the way, the man on the right was my co-author, Paul Polak, about 30 years ago. Now, what IDE soon recognized was that in order to market effectively, they had to use locally understood and locally accepted means of communication. So they went so far as to create a Bollywood movie. They spent a total of some $25,000, hired stars straight from Bollywood, and produced a film that was seen by 1 million people a year in settings like this, with a truck specially designed with a screen and a generator to show the film. And they did this on an annual basis for quite some time. Now, over the course of the first decade or so that IDE commercialized the treadle pump, they managed to spread a total of 1.5 million of them. There are probably some 3 million all told in operation around the world today. Operations that have picked up on, or if you will, have mimicked IDE's work, But IDE, meanwhile, introduced other innovations like drip irrigation systems that were extremely affordable. And the gist of it is depicted in this very oversimplified chart, that over the course of 25 years, 20 million people lifted themselves out of poverty. The orange cylinder on the left shows the $78 million that the farmers themselves invested in the treadle pump and its installation. The $139 million shows the investment of IDE itself in, excuse me,
Mal?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
I just want you to, if you can get a little bit closer to the mic, we're having a little bit of difficulty for some people to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The $139 million represents the investment by IDE itself. That came both from profits on the $25 sale price of the treadle pump, and ultimately from donations. And I got some big donations from the likes of the Gates Foundation and others. The biggest of these three cylinders, $288 million in that burgundy colored cylinder, represents the annual net income increase the farmers experienced as a result of IDE's work. Now, any banker will tell you, any business person, any investor will tell you that is very good business, looking at those multiples. That $288 million spread over 20 million people represents a lot of additional net income on an annual basis. Do the math. So that was all very nice. Came 2006, and Paul was taking stock, and he looked around and he said, well, that's great. Everybody's giving me all these awards and recognition for having helped 20 million people out of poverty, but I know that there are nearly 3 billion people who live in poverty and need the kind of help that an IDE could give them. How can we actually go to scale and reach that much larger number of people? He asked the question, who has the resources, who has the incentives that would make it possible for a market-based solution to achieve scale, to reach hundreds of millions of people, not just a couple of tens of millions? And there really is only one very obvious answer. Those incentives and those resources exist only in the private sector. The total amount of development assistance in the course of a year worldwide runs somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 billion. Maybe in a good year it's 180. The total gross domestic product of the entire planet is now upwards of $75 trillion. All the money that goes into development is just a trickle compared to the flood of money that runs through the private sector. I mean, consider this. Every year a total of more than $1 trillion is actually invested by business in emerging nations. That's a multiple of something like 6 to 1 over the amount of money invested in economic development that will presumably help people lift themselves out of poverty. That's a very big disjunction. So fortunately, if you really look carefully, you do some thinking, you recognize that there are innumerable opportunities to serve those 2.7 billion people, those people that Paul calls bypassed customers, with products and services that can help them lift themselves out of poverty. For example, there are at least 1 billion people who lack access to electricity. There's a business opportunity. There are at least 1 billion people who drink polluted water and pay the price with poor health. There's a business opportunity. There are at least 1 billion people who farm without irrigation. That's probably 2 billion for all I know. Another business opportunity. There are innumerable opportunities, and the question then comes up, how can business take advantage of them? What can be done to tap into the potential market breakthroughs represented by these untapped markets? Well, Paul and I developed an approach that he developed in the field. We more or less we codified it, if you will. We organized it. We gave it a name, and we have defined it more clearly. Zero-based design is the approach. It's not a formula that we apply to designing a new enterprise that has the potential to attack the problem of poverty at scale. And it consists principally of 8 different components, which I'm going to go through one at a time now, very, very briefly. First of all, and this is the absolute fundamental question that is involved in working with poor people, for that matter, working with anybody, if you really want to be successful, you listen. If you want to know what the problem is, you go to the people who've got the problem, and you spend a lot of time talking to them. Now, Paul developed a habit over 30 years ago of spending at least 6 or 7 hours with a poor family somewhere in a developing country and asking them questions about everything in their lives, their economic life, their social life, their everything but their sex life. Who knows what he asked, but there are recordings of these very long sessions that Paul conducted, and this was just a smattering of the experience that he gained over these past 3 decades. To date, he has spoken with, and by spoken I mean had sit-down, extensive discussions with over 3,000 families that represent this untapped market of $2 a day customers. And those are the people who can tell you the context in which your business will need to operate. Now, one of the things you learn very quickly is that whatever it is you do, whatever it is you're going to try to sell to the people who live on $2 a day, no matter where they live, is that it's got to be cheap. And you can't just take some existing product from the first world and cut the quality of the products and the manufacturing process and reduce the price by 20 or 30%. You really have to start from scratch. You've got to make it not 20 or 30 or even 40% cheaper. You've got to find a way to make it 80% or 90% cheaper. Now, there is no point in setting out to end poverty if you're going to think on a small scale. You have to begin at the outset with the understanding that whatever you do, you have got to build a business that is scalable. So the product has to be of universal or near universal interest among the 1 billion or more people who experience the problem you're trying to solve. And you need to have a way of building out the business to reach a huge proportion of those people. Furthermore, you're not talking about charity here, where this is not a social business as Muhammad Yunus would have it, of a company that somehow is going to manage to survive without earning a profit. That, by the way, is an oxymoron. a company must earn a profit in order to sustain itself. And in the case of a business that seeks to go to scale and accomplish big things for hundreds of millions of people, the profit margin has to be high. You have to have enough profit coming in that you can attract outside investors from the mainstream capital markets. Anyone who has worked in South Asia knows the term jugaad. It's a Hindi and Urdu term that means pretty much cobbled together. I think of it as the American equivalent phrase, American ingenuity. It means you take what you've got and you use it in the cleverest and most practical way you possibly can to get the job done, even if it isn't pretty. So here is a cobbled together device that delivers some sort of food or drink, and who knows how it started out. It was just a little motorbike when it started. Now, critical to the success of any venture that attempts to serve rural customers around the world is what is called a last mile distribution system. Paul speaks of it as the last 500 feet of distribution. And here, these women represent a solution developed by a company called Living Goods that delivers health-related products door to door in East African villages. And their door-to-door solution, their last-mile distribution system, is much like what we in the United States call the Avon Lady approach, where an army of saleswomen is recruited and trained to distribute and sell products. In this case, not cosmetics, but things like deworming pills and malaria bed nets and so forth. That is the key to success for going to scale in rural areas. Now, you also need to know that just as we in developing countries respond well to branding, as we feel as though if a brand is attractive, it means it will make us feel better by associating ourselves with it. I mean, just for example, a $100,000 Mercedes is not really worth, in terms of the materials and the labor that went into it, $100,000. It's the brand, the cachet, the prestige that is associated with that brand that helps make it such a desirable thing for people to do, for people to buy. Aspirational branding, in this sense, is what is probably more significant with people living on $2 a day or less than it is with us. It is significant because with so many fewer resources available to spend, so much less money to go around, if I, as a poor person, I'm going to spend some of my very, very hard-earned money, I'm going to want to get some real satisfaction out of that purchase. And that's why aspirational branding comes in. It means that you've really got to do as good a job as the Fortune 100 companies in designing and conveying the attributes of your brand. And then lastly, what I call contextual marketing. Now here, this is what is called a blitz team in a company I'm going to describe for you a little bit later. This group of young men have been hired by this particular company, Spring Health, that is selling safe drinking water, and they travel the streets and byways of a village en masse, going door to door, to create buzz, to create excitement about the virtues of this product, safe drinking water sold by their company. This is one of the ways that Spring Health reaches the largely illiterate villagers who constitute their customer base. There are other traditional methods used to reach them, but I can tell you that those methods do not include ads in newspapers or magazines or television commercials, because none of those has any reality in the lives of the villagers. So the upshot of this is, using this approach we call zero-based design, Paul and I contend that we can create brave new companies, that each of which will reach at least 100 million $2 a day customers over the course of a decade or so, that will generate more than $10 billion in annual revenue, and that will have a high enough profit margin that it will be able to attract major global investors. And I'm going to tell you now about 3 of those companies that are now underway in India. The first of these companies is called Sunwater. Now you can see in the graphic on the screen a stylized representation of a solar array. This represents a design developed by Paul Polak in collaboration with a team of volunteer space engineers from a company called Ball Aerospace, the people who put the Hubble telescope up in the sky. And they, over the course of about a year or year and a half, developed a village-level solar pumping system that is now in beta test in rural India, and has so far shown every sign of being able to reduce the cost of solar pumping by 80% from the diesel pumps that are now very widely in use in India. And that company will, of course, be able to use these solar generators for other purposes as well. A second company that Paul is and his colleagues are working to build is to be called Transform Energy. This company collects agricultural waste from the farms and fields of rural India and brings them to village-level collection points where they are roasted in special ovens that then create what is sometimes called green coal. These are pellets or briquettes that are somewhat similar to coal, have a very high density of energy, but a very low density of carbon that will be emitted in the process. So these briquettes or pellets are sold to electric generated, to coal-fired electric generating plants in places like China and Europe, where they enable the generating plant to lower its carbon output by as much as 40%. And this is a very highly prized capability, which would mean that this company, Transform Energy, will be able to operate at a very high profit. Now, what's the trick here? What's the innovation here? What's the game changer? Well, the ovens, which are called torrefaction ovens, that are currently in operation in Europe and in Canada, typically run something on the order of $10 million to $40 million a piece. That is not a practical level for a village, as you might imagine. The oven that Paul and his colleagues have designed and are now are now field testing in India will cost $25,000. The upshot of this innovation is that the company should be able to generate $1,000 a day in additional income for a village. Now, for a village of 200 or 300 families, which is somewhat typical, $1,000 a day is a lot of money. Thirdly, I want to tell you about Spring Health, and here's a little bit more information. I've mentioned the company before. It delivers a chlorinated, safe drinking water system. Here is an employee of the company demonstrating to employees, to other employees, how to conduct a test. This, of course, is the problem. The water that people have access to in streams and wells and so forth is used not just for drinking, but for bathing and often for eliminating wastes. So that 95% of the water in the area of India where Spring Health has set up its operations, eastern India, is contaminated by fecal pathogens. That's the problem. You drink the water, you cook with the water, sometimes even you just wash with the water that's contaminated, and you get sick. And you can get very, very gravely sick, particularly if you're a child. So the solution that the company came up with is, first of all, the ruthlessly affordable technology that is the key. This is an electrochlorinating system that comes from the Antenna Foundation off the shelf in Switzerland, and it costs around $250. This compares with the existing widespread solution that costs something on the order of $4,000 to $6,000 that is in place in many of the water companies in villages and towns in India and throughout the world. It's called reverse osmosis. This solution is orders of magnitude cheaper. The second part of the solution, and even more significant, is the last mile distribution. Spring Health does not set up its own stores. It partners with village shops. In India, they're called kirana shops. And in every village, you'll find practically everywhere in the world something on the order of, there's at least one, and they're usually 2 or 3 or more small shops that carry what are regarded as necessities, foodstuffs and things like cigarettes and so forth. And Spring Health partners in each village with the most reliable of these stores as judged by the village elders, and then uses locally hired people to deliver the material to the last mile. Most of the original design of Spring Health was that the money that the water would be sold at the store, where the company built a 3,000 liter tank that it refreshed twice a week. But it's become very clear very quickly that most people want to have the water delivered directly to their homes, hence the use of this bicycle. Nowadays it's mostly auto rickshaws that are used to deliver the water to people's homes. 80% of the people want the water delivered to their homes at the price of about 7 or 8 cents a day for a 10-liter jerry can. So this company, Spring Health, here's how it more or less, this is a stylized growth plan. It's not exactly from the investment portfolio, but it shows how over the course of a decade, in this case a little less than a decade, the company hopes to reach over 200 million customers. And let me tell you something. If the company really does succeed in doing that, and it's well on its way, then it is going to have in place a last mile distribution system that can be used to deliver healthcare and education and other necessities as well. So this is not a simple, not a simple for-profit gambit. This is a dream designed to really make a difference in the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world. Maybe you have a dream like that as well, or maybe you'll go to bed tonight and you'll come up with one. Think about it. Now, if you want to know a little more about zero-based design, you can go to this URL, businesssolution2poverty.com/zero-based-design, and you'll find a free pre-recorded PowerPoint there, which I prepared, that goes into more detail on this all-important concept of zero-based design. And then in general, if you want more information, you can go to our website, and you can go to Paul Polak's website as well, paulpolak.com, P-O-L-A-K. And if you'll find that there are dozens and dozens of articles and posts and excerpts from the book and reviews, and you name it. There's a lot of information on this subject. So, and you can get in touch with me at that email address as well if you wish. So I think that is the end of what I had to say, and I hope that I haven't lost everybody in the process. Hello there.
No, people have been pretty attentive. Can you hear me, Mel?
I can indeed.
Mel, can you hear me? Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, I can.
So we actually do have a few questions, and I'm going to go back up to, let's see. So this is a question that came from Marshall Carby, and Marshall is an artist. And Marshall has asked a question, can we begin talking about creating a curriculum to engage creative students, such as art and design, engineering students, based on zero-based design? He says, I will not be at the SVN, which is the Social Venture Network Fall Conference, but maybe we can talk about this at some point. So what is your reaction to starting out with students, whether that would be high school or college, in a number of different disciplines with this concept of zero-based design so that they get it from the very beginning?
Well, thank you, Marshall. It's an intriguing question. I think the best answer is that there are a lot of efforts underway now, particularly in the design field. A company called IDEO, I-D-E-O, has been developing a curriculum and an approach, more broadly speaking, along a parallel line. They call it human-centered design. It's very similar, although ours is much more specifically focused on going to scale on the question of poverty. Certainly, the core ideas in this concept of zero-based design are part of the curriculum at some of the more forward-looking business schools around the country, like the Bainbridge Graduate Institute up in Seattle, for example. And there are many other programs that are gradually moving toward integrating these varying approaches. And I'd say just poke around and you'll find something.
All right. So then we have a comment really from Bob Sutton. He's talking from Costa Rica, and he says, thanks for the note that capital means profit potential. all or most nonprofits can earn revenue but then dribble instead of jump ahead. What is your thoughts about that? Or do you want?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'd respond in two ways. I mean, first of all, yes, nonprofits that do generate revenue, and in fact most do, one way or another, will find that there are all kinds of pressures that are a little different from the pressures in a for-profit business to just use, to put that money into the general fund to pay the staff and to do other things. And rarely is that revenue invested as a business might do in building the enterprise, expanding and going to scale. That's looking at it from the point of view of the individual enterprise. If you look at it from a global perspective, look at nonprofits and philanthropists in general, you find that the NGOs of the world, no matter how much money they receive in the form of donations or revenue or both, they're not focused. The money is invested scattershot in 100,000 different bright ideas, and nothing ever goes to scale. So even though 5,000 of those 100,000 ideas might actually show great promise, none of them actually has the meaningful impact that's necessary because they're all different from everything else and they don't coordinate, and the money doesn't get invested in a focused way that would make a difference.
Okay, we got some a specific question about the people who are the intended customers for the products that you were demonstrating in the presentation. Nora Betancourt wants to know how are these folks, if their incomes are less than $1 a day, how are they able to actually afford to buy these products?
First of all, I think it's important to note that the $2 a day definition of poverty, which Paul and I use, and which is the most widely accepted definition of poverty, does not mean that every person at that level of deprivation walks around with $2 of cash in her or his pocket on any particular day. The money that goes through the hands of poor people comes and goes in lumps. Most often, the money comes in a lump sum when the harvest goods are sold. Sometimes a poor person in that income group will get a job in a city and make enough money for 3 months in the course of a couple of weeks. So there's another lump. The lumps go out when there are health problems, or when the bride price has to be paid, or when a festival has to be sponsored. So the financial affairs of really poor people in the world are not like those of people living where I live in Berkeley, California, or living pretty much anywhere else in the wealthier countries of the global north. There's a very good book called Poor Economics, which I would recommend you to take a look at to get a better understanding of just exactly how poor people relate to money.
So we have a comment actually by David Peck, who says that $5 trillion is generated yearly by the 4 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid, which is, so that kind of answers the question. There is definitely resources there, and people need to buy things, and even if they have very little money, things like clean water products or basic food items will be something that they would prioritize for purchases. So Emery Sindani, Emery has asked a question, what about the idea of a startup fund in working with a poor community which cannot afford the real price of products in the market? Not sure what a startup fund would mean. Emery is from Kenya. Do you need a little more clarification on that, Mal? Or
no, I'm afraid it doesn't compute.
okay, so Emery, if you would type in a little bit more detail about what you mean by a startup fund, that would be helpful. And then Vanessa Lowe has asked the question, what does the term zero-based design mean?
Good question. In budgeting, as some of you accounting types might know, there's a concept of zero-based budgeting. This was introduced back in the 1960s from some very bright, largely soulless people who decided that government agencies shouldn't be just making next year's budget based on lowering or increasing each line item by 2% or 10%, depending on the whims of the governing body. Instead, they ought to take a look at a budget and start from scratch, start from zero, and decide line item by line item, is this line item necessary at all? If so, how much money is needed in order to make this function work well? Is this next line item, does this next line item really need to have a lot of money, or can we reduce the amount down to almost zero? Line by line, the budget was built from scratch. So that is the concept that we brought to zero-based design. Most designers work from templates. Industrial designers I'm talking about, or business designers, if you will, people who come up with ideas for new enterprises. They start with something that looks like something else. They take a product that's already in the marketplace and they say, well, we're going to use cheaper materials and we're going to eliminate this feature and that feature, and that way we can reduce the price by 30% and we'll sell a zillion of them. Well, that doesn't work when you're trying to lift poor people out of poverty. You, as noted, you're going to need to come up with something that is ruthlessly affordable, and that is rarely going to be achieved by simply changing the materials or making or in some other way tweaking existing products. You have to start from zero, and zero in fact means starting and talking to the people who are the poor customers in the first place, finding out from them what it is that they really want and need and how they think they might go about solving the problem of getting it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. There's actually related questions that might illuminate a little bit more.
Okay.
So let's see. I'm trying to prioritize. We have a lot of questions here, Mal, which is great. Seems that for someone to want to pull themselves out of poverty, they have to have hope that something can be different. Is that one of the roles that branding plays? This is from Jesse Stoner.
Yes, that is absolutely one of the roles that branding plays. Thank you, Jesse. That is aspirational branding. It creates hope. It creates hope that something can be better. If let's say I'm a Prius driver, and I've been driving Priuses, and all of a sudden I have enough money, and I decide that I want to spend that money on a better car, so I'm going to go out and buy a Mercedes. Now I'm going to think, wow, things are going to be better. I'm going to feel better about myself. Well, no, in fact, that's all untrue. I will continue to buy Priuses, thank you very much. But the fact is that by offering me that brand that connotes a higher level of prestige and satisfaction, the company that makes the Mercedes has enabled me to gain hope.
All right. Let's see. I'm trying to keep things in as thematic as possible along the lines. So let's see. So David Burno asked a question, what about microfinance schemes? Can this be a good way to allow people to buy products?
Well, microfinance, in my view, is a very, very mixed bag. In fact, I've just recently collaborated with Paul Polak and a third co-author on an article in which we detail the very, very limited impact that microfinance has had on poverty around the world. However, I do think that there is a larger question here that the question points to. The fact is that a lot of the devices, the products and services that these companies I've been talking about hope to sell to poor people will require financing. I mean, a $25 treadle pump to somebody living on $1 a day, for example, required financing, and often that meant that the local financial institutions, including banks, had to make loans available for IDE to be able to sell the treadle pumps that it did back in Bangladesh 3 decades ago. Similarly, the solar generating, the solar pump that I described for the company called Sun Water will cost something on the order of $1,500 and will require financing that will either have to come directly from the Sun Water company or from existing financial institutions, or new ones for that matter. Now, in a few cases, that may be micro credit programs. But for the most part, a solution like that is going to call for slightly larger amounts than most microcredit programs operate in, and it's more likely that banks catering to small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, will come into the picture. Microcredit can play a role. It should play a role, particularly where the objective is to increase the income in people's pockets. And I would hope that more and more microfinance will turn in that direction.
Yeah, it's I share your mixed bag ideas, and I hope that there's a way that microfinance can also pay attention to what's happening in terms of opportunities to make their products more accessible and useful to giving people access to things that they need, and not just to meet the needs of the microfinance institutions' bottom line. Now, Sean Alexander is asking the question, you've been speaking about the customer and speaking about the customer, and what about employment of the poor so they can have an increased income? Do the company examples you have noted employ significant numbers of people?
Yes. That is, you're absolutely right, Sean. That's a critical question. None of the work that Spring Health does would work without a large cadre of local employees. It's not people from Bangalore, where the chairman of the company lives, who are going to go out and deliver water door to door. It is young men riding bicycles or auto rickshaws who will go out on those little rural byways and deliver the water. So in every village, currently around 200, where Spring Health operates, the local entrepreneur, the distributor that the company has contracted with, has hired usually 2 or 3 local young people for jobs, steady jobs, to deliver the water. And the tank that the company builds next to or inside of each of the shops, each of the Kirana shops, that's built by local people, local artisans who are hired by the company. The Kirana shops themselves, sometimes when business picks up, hire additional people as well. The fact is that in creating a last mile distribution system, it is virtually impossible, given the way the world works today, to avoid hiring a lot of local people. Now, some businesses will hire more than others. For Spring Health, the numbers are not huge, although they will definitely have a positive impact on the level of economic activity in each village where the company is doing business. But in the case of a company like Transform Energy, the numbers of people involved will be much larger, because just gathering all of the agricultural waste, or harvesting high energy content materials like mesquite will create jobs in much larger numbers, and will have a significant economic impact as a result.
Okay, I just want to let everyone know, as you can probably see, we have gone over the hour, and there are a few really excellent questions left. So if you need to leave, remember that we will have a recording of this entire broadcast, but those of you who can stick around, I think you'll enjoy these last few questions for Mal. So Nora Betancourt has asked the question, I do understand the lump sum concept, but people need to make choices, and those are usually related to short-term basic needs. It sort of relates to the comment of a fund to afford products like those described in the presentation. Sounds like even if it's affordable, there might be some pre-marketing to do. So that's really just a comment by Nora. So in other words, getting people to understand why they would need to save up for a particular product, why it's important to them. So that's kind of along the lines of the aspirational marketing, but do you have a specific idea about that?
Well, I think we're talking about products and services. I mean, Spring Health, for Spring Health, we're talking about a service rather than a product, even though there is physically a product involved, a jerry can of 10 liters of safe drinking water. The fact is, it's the delivery service that is what people are paying for, and that's like 7 cents a day that goes throughout the course of the year. In the case of a product like the solar pump from Sun Water, well, yeah, absolutely, there's going to need to be some pre-education. But I think there we're talking about a business proposition that's a little more sophisticated than most. The competitor for the Sun Water solar pump is a diesel pump, which exists in enormous numbers in rural areas throughout India, and those pumps run $7,500 a piece. So educating people that they can get the same job done just as well and more reliably because of the lack of moving parts for 80% less will require obviously some promotion, but I wouldn't call it an educational campaign that's going to be necessary to get people to believe that.
Okay, Emery Sindani from Kenya has asked the question, social enterprises develop products for the bottom of the pyramid which require testing and piloting. The development stage of the product requires funding, which as I mentioned, is a startup fund. What was Paul Pollock's initial financing? Was it a grant or his own investment?
Oh, I see. Well, Paul has been at this for, well, going on 35 years now. So talking about the original investment is really not entirely relevant. Let's look at any particular venture. With Spring Health, for example, the company, actually the parent company of Spring Health, there is a holding company in the United States called Windhorse International, received investments from social impact funds, Calvert funds, for example, and for a short time, Acumen invested some money as well. First Light Ventures. There were investments that paid for the pilot. Yes, you need money for these things. In the case of Transform Energy, the man who is running the venture, basically Paul's partner, who fell in love with the concept of the torrefaction process that would create low carbon output energy, is himself funding the pilot stage. In the case of Sun Water, I mean, we used crowdfunding, and there are investments, small investments from individual investors like myself. It's really, yes, there is a need for seed money, and occasionally, in the case of a very good idea for a business venture, a grant or a loan might come even from a philanthropist. But basically, starting a business is usually a matter of friends and family. I mean, I've done it many, many times, and I can tell you that a brand new idea, no matter how exciting it might be, isn't necessarily going to bring in hordes of venture capitalists clamoring to shower you with millions. You really have to start from scratch and pull the money together essentially from friends and family to get something really started. Investors don't normally come in until the concept has been proven.
And then there are things like IDEO or Kickstarter or other crowdfunding, which you're not going to raise millions that way, but you're going to potentially raise tens of thousands, which may be enough to get the kind of initial capital to do some research in development or do some pilot testing and things like that. Let me just, there's one more question which I'm going to answer in a minute, but I'm going to combine a couple of questions from Vanessa Lowe and have that really be the last one that you would answer, Mel. You suggested some of us might consider working in the for-profit sector to support these solutions. What companies are creating products like this at affordable prices, and how do regular folks invest in these companies? Are they publicly traded?
No, these companies are not publicly traded, and frankly, I think it highly unlikely that in anything like the foreseeable future that any of them will be. Publicly traded companies have handcuffs on them from Wall Street, which require all sorts of reports and assumptions about the way money needs to be handled that make it virtually impossible for them to be truly mission-driven businesses. We're not talking about businesses here that are out just to make a buck. We're talking about mission-driven businesses, social enterprises that, given the way Wall Street works now, are very, very unlikely to become publicly traded.
That's great. That's good clarification. David Peck asked a question about any good ideas to help the 2.5 billion with no bank account to participate in the formal economy. And what I would say, David, who is in Madrid, is one way to look at for people at the bottom of the pyramid to get involved in savings and lending is through savings groups. And we've done quite a bit of webinar exposure to savings groups. You can find information about a training we're actually doing on savings groups in Rwanda in November, and this is a good opportunity to plug our next webinar, which will be coming up on October 1st, which is essentially looks at, it's called Processes and Tools for Implementing a Private Service Provider Project. And this is a way of organizing savings groups with private entrepreneurs that actually go out and promote savings groups. So that you can look at our webinar page. That's Wednesday, October 1st at 9:30 with Mark Bevois from Catholic Relief Services. Well, I think what I'd like to do is wrap up the webinar. We went over quite a bit with some really excellent questions, and Mal, this has really been a terrific opportunity to get into more depth on the business solution to poverty. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this out there in Oakland, California, and I appreciate the gods of technology and the internet have cooperated, and I want to remind people that Mal will be on the UNH campus on the 30th of September at 5 o'clock. There's information up on the UNH and Carsey School of Public Policy website about this event, so please go ahead and check that out and come and see Mal. You can buy the book, you can have him sign it for you, and we will be sending everybody who is involved in this webinar information about the Social Business Conference that's coming up, or Social Business Innovation Challenge, actually kickoff event that Mal will be at. And I do have a couple more announcements, but Mal, I want to thank you again and appreciate you being a part of this. And I know that you're gonna make your PowerPoint available in a PDF for people. This recording will be available for people. So if people had to leave, there is an opportunity to get more information. Mal's website will also be posted along with Paul Pollak's and the Business Solution to Poverty website. So I want to thank you again, Mal, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed the opportunity and the good questions, and looking forward to seeing you.
Great. So, well, thank you, everybody, for your attentiveness. And if you were needing to leave and you're listening to this later on, remember that we do have upcoming webinars. I just want to let you know that in addition to processes and tools for implementing a private service provider project, on Wednesday, October 1st, with Mark Bevois from Catholic Relief Services, we will then have Sharia-compliant microfinance, what and where it is, and what can it teach the rest of us. This is with our friend Malcolm Harper, who is a Carsey Fellow and with the Cranfield School of Management on Thursday, November 19th. And finally, the final SMDP webinar for 2014 will be Financing Options for Social Enterprise with Drew Tolchin from Social Enterprise Associates on Wednesday, December 10th. So you can see all this information in addition to our webinar series archive that goes back almost 2 years now. Quite a few webinars up there that you can listen to the recordings, download the PowerPoints, and learn a wide range of topics, wide range of information on social enterprise, microfinance, savings groups, and other areas. I thank everybody for attending today, and I hope that you'll come back for a future SMDP webinar. Have a good afternoon, evening, or the rest of your morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much.